All right. My name's Jacob. I am JCBLW everywhere on the web, and if I'm not that, I don't really care about that social website. And also, I'm an organizer of js.la because I love the JS community. Today, I'm going to be talking about visualizing audio on the web. It's a very descriptive title. It's nothing fancy, no clickbait or anything. You're getting what you see there. I probably can work on that, especially when we put up the video. We want to make it a little bit more enticing and do something with it. But right now, it's just visualizing audio on the web. So before we go forward and talk about visualizing audio, I kind of want to take a step back. I mean, I'm getting older. I turned 29 this month, and get out of here. The older I get, the more I like to look back and be nostalgic about the things of my past. And one thing is, visualizing audio or visualizing music was it's something that I really, really liked. Now, who remembers this? Yeah, so this is Windows Media Player. This was actually my first visualizations that I ever, saw or probably even dealt with as a young child. And when I see this, I'm like, oh, it brings me back to a place where I'm sitting in front of my computer and I'm shoving CDs in my CD drive and opening up a program. This is before streaming or anything was out. Now this is a YouTube video, and when I see comments like this, it really makes me sad because it's like, this is no longer going to be available to me to be able to use this, even though, granted, I probably wouldn't use it. But there's no chance of me actually using it. And this being a YouTube video, of course, there is funny comments, aka how to trip balls when you're 10. This is kind of funny because I was probably 10 when I was using Windows Media Player. And actually, I think this is a pretty good talk title. If you don't mind me, I'm going to change this real quick. There we go. I think that's gonna get the clicks right there. All right, going forward. All right, enough about going in the past. Let's talk about the present. So I don't know if you guys have checked out modern interfaces for playing audio. Pretty sure you've used Spotify or iTunes or something. And one thing about that is that music visualizations are usually gone from those interfaces. It's more or less they're behind some tab, or they're non-existent, or there's some static visualization, which is on SoundCloud, you actually have these very static visualizations, and it's pretty much just a progress bar that you're going through. And back to myself, I actually just started a new job, and it's at this really cool place called Headspace. It's a meditation app. We actually hosted it there last month. But one thing that's interesting, as this is a progression in my career, is also that my prior places I was working with maps and latitude, longitude, putting pins on a map, and if I ever wanted to do anything with audio, it was really on my own time, and there was no really practical use for me to do it. Our main product at Headspace is actually audio files, so me getting to look into these new web audio APIs was actually beneficial for my job as well, which I kind of love that I'm actually doing something that I want to do, as well as it's kind of benefiting me a little bit. And before I started, I was checking out the product at Headspace, and they have this really cool player. It's very light, but you can see that the player is kind of moving a little bit. It has a little bit of animation. It's supposed to just be smooth and soothing. It's not really it's not doing any audio visualization, even though you can kind of say it's a vibe type of visualization or something, because it is a meditation app. But I thought it was really intriguing. You see audio players and it's just a play button and then a stop button, maybe a progress bar, but you really don't have much innovation. And besides doing that, you have album art as big as you can get it or something. And the first thing that went through my mind, which I think probably goes through a lot of our minds from time to time, is I just want to implement it in JavaScript. Why we actually have a web player at Headspace, but it looks nothing like that cool one that I was talking about. That was our mobile player, and that was actually a YouTube video that I was showing there. So before I started, I actually took off a month and I rode my skateboard around New York and DC. But during that time, I actually stopped in a bunch of coffee shops and I would just hack on stuff, and it was mostly trying to implement this thing in JavaScript. Now, the next slide that I'm going to show you is my first try, or not first try, it's the first step in a progression of trying to implement this player. Now, when you look at this, and sorry for the blurry quality, but this looks nothing like that player at all. So let me kind of like go through my thought process of this. So the player is kind of like this random blob, and there's like pieces of it moving in a certain direction. So what I did was like, I want to make a bunch of points and put them around a circle and then move them in a random direction. And that's what this is, except I'm really bad at math. So as you can see, it's not a circle. It actually came out to something that's more like a sideways donut. I thought it was really cool. And like when I build something really cool, I like to like at least take a screenshot or put it on Twitter or something. So that's what I did with this, and that's just this progression in it. And as you can see, I got better at math. This is another visualization. Well, I didn't get better. I just like figured out what my problem was and fixed it. And yeah, so this is just like I'm changing the colors around. As you can see, it's a little bit more coherent. It's getting a little bit closer. Still doesn't look anything like it. And what you'll see in some of my demos, as well as just some of the other slides, is I like to I make things very declarative, so I can just like take these like numbers and just twist them and like turn them to 11 and then probably turn it back to 9 because my computer's lagging too much. And that's what you'll see in a lot of these demos, is me just kind of like messing around with numbers. And then I also have another step in here, but the thing is that I did a lot of this without source control. And I really wish that I used source control the entire time, because then I could show you a better progression of this, because the last slide to this next slide is way different. So more or less, like there's a big gap in this entire history of the way this players came. And more or less, what I did was I connected those points, made quadratic curves between them, and made it one solid shape. And then I actually started playing audio with it. And this next step, and it's on. So this is what it looks like. There's a little bit of music here, as you can see. We actually are starting to visualize audio in this. And granted, this is not very calm. If you look at it, this would not be soothing to be inside of a meditation app. But more or less, this was just me taking that knob and dialing it to 11. And so this is like a very simple visualization. So I'm taking those random points, and usually there's like a small threshold, and that's kind of like at a rest state. And when there's like a snare hit or a beat drop or something, the frequency goes up, and you're able to have a larger variation. And that's where you see all like the little spikes, because it goes in and it goes out. Now I have another one. Go ahead and turn it back on. This one is not so much a demo of the player. I'm kind of like showing off some of the functionality, because I kind of built this in steps. But as you can see, the animation got a little bit more subtle. This one's a little bit better. You could actually see this probably in kind of like an interface, you could say. The animation changed. Instead of just doing like the random points and having a bigger threshold to them, this one actually, the border gets a little bit larger. There's actually, what I found interesting at this point is there's a lot of different things you can do with audio visualization that's not so straightforward. I mean, this is like a subtle animation. If you thought about Windows Media Player that I had in the very first slide or second slide, that was like a full screen immersion, sometimes a little too much, I could say. Where this is a little bit more subtle. Granted, it probably would get annoying after a while. And this really sparked my interest in kind of like audio visualization, so much so that I actually built an NPM module. It's called Sound Dashboard. It's on NPM, and also you can find it on my GitHub. I'll actually post this to the Slack channel afterwards, so you guys can check it out if you want. But what this allows me to do is load up like an audio buffer file, and then be able to like analyze the data of it when it's like playing, and grab that data out really conveniently instead of hooking up these APIs. Now you might be thinking like, oh, that's cool and all, but like, how are you actually doing this? Like, what is actually going on that maybe somebody else wants to do audio visualization, and like, what is the steps that I had to take to get to that point? So I have a couple little pieces of code, and I'll try to walk through this, and then I'll answer questions at the end, and I'm pretty sure it will be mostly about these slides. But essentially, I'm using the audio context API. I won't say it's new, but it's been around for a couple of years now. The support for it is pretty good. There is some methods that are a little bit spotty in terms of browser support, and more or less like my demos only work in Chrome and Firefox right now. But more or less, I'm creating an audio context, and that's what I'm doing, that new audio context. I'm creating a buffer source. What a buffer source is essentially I can attach like an audio buffer to it, and that will allow me to like play and stop the audio buffer. And then I'm also creating an analyzer. Now the analyzer does exactly what it sounds like. It's analyzing the data that is going through it. And the way that I can pump data through the analyzer is down below, as you can see, I am adding the audio buffer. Now that's like a uint8 array, which is like a array of arrays that's holding like binary data inside of it. And I'm connecting it to the analyzer, which I think I spelled one of these wrong. But analyzer.connect, and then I'm connecting the analyzer straight to the destination. You can think of this as the speakers of your computer. And then I'm just starting it. And you can add a bunch of params to that to start it at a certain point. Now, to get the data out of the analyzer, because I just showed you how to connect the analyzer, this is how you would get it out. So you get a buffer length. That's pretty much the audio that is playing at a certain time. Because we're going to call this function over and over and over again. So whenever you're playing like an audio file and you want to get a certain data out of a certain time when it's playing, you can get the length of the actual binary, how long it is, and then I'm going to create a uint8 array with that length, which is going to just create a blank one, and then calling audio analyzer get byte time domain data. I really love that method name. But then calling it with data array is actually going to hydrate that data array with a bunch of binary data from that current buffer. And then as you can see here, I'm just using request animation frame to call this thing over and over and over again and get out the data for each sequence. And this is what actually creating a visualization looks like. Now, like I said, I'm not good at math, so I don't know exactly what's going on here. Granted, there's only a little bit of code. But more or less what's happening is we're calculating a waveform, and we're just getting x and y coordinates for it. That's what these are. And then you could take those x and y coordinates, and you can put absolute position divs, or more likely you probably want to render those to a canvas, and then you would have like an actual waveform if you just rendered those as like circles on a canvas, which is really, really cool, because it's like, that's not that much code to be able to render out a waveform. And if you want to look at more, there's actually a good MDN doc that I have in like some of my GitHub repos that is the place where I actually learned how to do a lot of this stuff, because they have a doc on how to analyze audio data on the web, and that's where a lot of this code came from. Now I have a few demos. Now the first one I have here, I was just playing around with stuff, cranking the knobs on things, and this is like a very sporadic, like, it's just actually like a small snippet of like an animation that you'll see later on. But more or less, like, I call this one the event horizon. I just thought it was cool. Yeah, it's very chaotic. And then now I have another demo. And this is actually, can you turn on? This is actually the blob player that I was showing you. I just have it down here kind of as a player. It's not, I mean, the whole interface, it doesn't revolve around this audio visualization. Because actually, there's a lot of times where I think audio visualization is very good at when it's subtle. It's just these subtle things. I mean, you talking to your Google Assistant or Siri or something, they're doing a little bit of visualization of the input that's coming into your phone. And it's nice that you're getting that feedback that there actually is like audio going through it. So I kind of like, you know, just doing these subtle things. But then again, I don't always do very subtle things. And I have some demos that are a little bit more chaotic. Now, this is a 3D demo. It moves very quickly, and it's very jagged. And this is one trouble that I've been having with visualizing audio. It's just that you're getting so much data coming in. Like you saw, I actually am just doing request animation frame. I could delay that, but the more I delay it, the worse the visualizations become. And when you have these things happening every like 100 milliseconds or probably shorter than that, it's hard to do tweening between the different points and be able to do smooth animations. It's possible, but it's not that easy. But this is showing you you can actually like integrate this kind of stuff into anything, even like 3D objects. Then I have one more, same song, but this is actually just a waveform, but it's around a circle. So essentially took that same math that I was able to put points around a circle, and then I just applied a waveform to it. And then that way, when it hits like a snare drum or a beat drop or something, you'll see that it'll kind of like fan out. I'm actually caching like 5 versions of the waveform, and then cycling through those. And then this outer one is the oldest, and then the inner one is the newest. And actually, I'll show you really quick how easy it is to like change this around. And this is why I have so many just random looking visualizations. So I'm going to go to my code real quick. And as you can see, I just have like a bunch of variables up at the top. But what's cool is that I can just say like 100. And then that should update. And if not, I can refresh. As you can see, it changed around the whole visualization. I mean, granted, I think the other one was cooler looking. This is not bad. As you can see, this is actually the one that the event horizon originally came from, because you see the lines from the circles, the outlines. And then I could even do things like this, which this is actually going to just make my computer go super slow. So now I'm caching up to 10 of these things and doing the visualizations with that. But once you get to something like this, it actually starts to slow down the animation. It looks very laggy. But it looks really cool, especially when you're not hearing the audio, because when you're not hearing the audio, it just looks like a cool animation. But that is it, and thank you. Do we have the second mic up here? Here, he's got the mic for you.
Are you using any libraries for doing the animations in those demos?
I was using a tweening library, it was just in the blob demo. A lot of those things, I'm just taking the raw audio data, and then I'm trying to make some type of waveform or like a frequency something, and then just putting that straight into the points. With the blob player, and I'm not really using any animations in like the main thing here, but you'll see when I actually press like pause, it kind of like tweens out and in from those different points. That's the only place that I'm actually using animation library at all. But definitely, if I wanted to smooth things out, for instance, in like the 3D one, it's very jarring sometimes. And I'm definitely thinking about integrating some type of animation library or some tweening library to be able to smooth those things out.
Are you categorizing the audio sounds, or could you elaborate how, like, you have a drum or some other instrument segment?
So really, a lot of the visualizations are more or less based off of what would be the part of the waveform. I'm taking like a highest peak of the waveform and saying that's kind of like the highest bit inside of, so essentially like based off of that, I'm making like the border fatter or the threshold for the random points larger. Because you can't really like, I mean, you can get into a lot of like breaking apart the song and whatnot. You can actually do that with this stuff. Smarter people than I am can do that with that stuff. I really just like to make things look cool right off the bat. But more or less, like what you're seeing here has nothing to do with like separating any of the sounds. It's just more or less taking part of the waveform at its peak and being like, okay, this is a very loud part of the song or something like that.
When trying to sync music with visualization, did you have to tackle any problems with latency at all?
Now, that's a good question, because I was going to say something, but sometimes I forget to say something. So you might see in this slide, I actually instead of connecting, I could connect the source directly to the destination. And that's actually, I think, inside of the MDN doc that I was referencing earlier. That's how they did it. One thing I noticed when I did that, though, is that the visualization sometimes got out of sync. So the way that I was able to kind of fix it was that I would, straight from the analyzer, go to the speakers. So that way it always had to go through the analyzer before it hit the speakers. So a lot of that latency wasn't there, just because the analyzer had already gotten the data out of the buffer that was playing at that current time by the time it hit the speakers.